From SABC headquarters in Auckland Park, Johannesburg, welcome to this Tuesday edition of The Watchdog. My name is Vuya Mvoko, and here's what we are focusing on this evening. 10 years on, have mine worker unions learned anything from the Marikana massacre? We get reflections from leaders of AMCU and the NUM, whose bitter rivalry contributed significantly to the toxic atmosphere seen in the run-up to the Marikana massacre a decade ago. 10 years down the line, still no one has taken responsibility or has been prosecuted for the Marikana massacre. South Africa has a right to know. The civil society group today marched on the National Prosecuting Authority. We also ask mining company Sibanye Stillwater what they have been doing to fulfill the promises that they have been making over the years, including why they were not part of today's commemorative event, even though they were on the program. Tonight's Marikana massacre episode of The Watchdog starts now.
I have lost the love of my life, the father of my kids, and also the person that I intended to get out with. Honestly, it's not nice to leave somebody you love, somebody so close to your heart. It was terrible because I was still young. It is still wanting me even today.
Ubuhlungu ukuba ngumhlolokazi usishiyeke nabantwana nomzi akukho lula, impilo so ayikho lula, inzima, kubuhlungu kakhulu ukuthathelwa umyeni ngamapolisa, abulawe ngamapolisa eMarikana. Umyeni wami engenzanga nto, elwela amalungelo wakhe, befuna imali kumqeshi.
Kule 10 years uThabiso Msebenzane engekho, andikasiva, andikayifumani impendulo, kuba kaloku ndinombuzo uthi uThabiso wabulawela ntoni. Andikamfumani namhlanje umuntu wabulala uThabiso. Ipolisi labulala uThabiso alikaveli. Ndiyafuna ukulazi uba lalimbulalela ntoni, ngoba kaloku uThabiso ufe kwaSinthu ephakamise izandla.
Umyeni wami ubephangela, mna ndingumama ohleli nabantwana, okhulisa abantwana. Xa ndingekho ke ngoku njengoba ndangena esipeyisini sakhe, abantwana bafana noba bazinkedama. Ubomi nyhani bunzima, abantwana abanamntu banakekelayo. 2016 ndiswelekelwe intombi yam endala, eyona ibijonge aba bancinci kunabanye.
Simple English, SABC News, Marikana.
Only some of the widows of the 34 mine workers who were shot and killed by the police during the Marikana massacre near Rustenburg in the northwest on this day 10 years ago. For them, as you heard there, it's been 10 long years of grief, of irreplaceable loss, and of course unanswered questions. Our reporter Sintleng Lihihi and video journalist Jabu wa Africa compiled that package which got us going on this special Marikana massacre commemorative broadcast. Today, of course, scores of people, including survivors, family members, union members, politicians, all gathered in Marikana to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the massacre. And that's where a rather fiery AMCU president, Joseph Matunjwa, gave the keynote address.
I think that Parliament must be disbanded. They must come back here. Let's get a new leader that will go and take what belongs to us and bring back to us. The time of promises is over. Mineral energy complex, as I've said earlier on, is a genesis of all social ills in South Africa. Disposition of land has caused by mineral energy complex. Taxations that were structured for black people was caused by the very same mineral energy complex to make or to use black people to be the cannon folder for these mines. Wafaka bokhanda mbondo ukuthi siforce sizosebenza emgodini abotata bethu.
AMCU President Joseph Matunjwa going back into history as to how mining or people got to come to places like Johannesburg, the Northwest, and several other areas of our country to eke a living from the mines. Of course, we will be playing you a few bites from that particular commemorative event that was held in Marikana. Of course, conspicuous by their absence today was mining company Sibanye Stillwater, which, as many of you would know, bought Lonmin mines a few years ago. Themba Nkosi is their Chief Social Performance Officer. He joins us on the line. Mr. Nkosi, good evening. Thanks very much for your time. Perhaps clarify this one first. From the program we saw this morning, you were supposed to be part of the proceedings. What happened there?
Evening, Rio, and evening to your listeners, and thanks for the invitation to your show. It's very simple. I mean, we never got an invite, so I'm actually failing to understand how we then get fielded in a program where we never got an invite. Firstly, secondly, we never got to confirm our participation. All we got from AMCU, as per usual, was a request to assist with logistics, and logistics being ablution facilities, water in the area, and grading of the road that leads to the copy as per usual. So, and we have obliged, like we normally obliged to such a request. But as for us being fielded in a program where we were never invited and we actually never confirmed, it's almost what we call a trap. It's probably creating a hype out of nothing.
Well, I mean, I know there's no magic in the number 10, but one would have thought that perhaps if you're not invited on your own, you would want to form part of this particular commemorative events, even if it's to, signal to South Africans that you are, prepared to do away with the past, start on a new belief, and correct the wrongs that were, this episode, some of the wrongs that this particular episode brought about back 10 years ago.
Yeah, and I agree with you. You'd like to believe that at some point, as parties in the relationship will get into a room and speak one message around the message of healing and acknowledging the pain of the families. And it is actually said that obviously the absence of management team on stage obviously creates an impression to families that we are not a caring employer. Actually, we are. AMCU respectfully invited us to their memorial lecture, which happened earlier last week, and we attended that. We duly obliged and attended. Unfortunately, our CEO couldn't attend because he's traveling overseas. We did record a message of support that would have come from our Dr. Richard Stewart, who's actually the head of our South African operations. So upon being invited, we do participate. Like I said, we got also the request for facilities we supported. I'm also made to believe that some of our managers did go to the event. Obviously, they wouldn't have taken center stage because they're not invited on stage. The only stage that was place that was reserved for speakers.
One would say even more reason, perhaps, I mean, if indeed you are as committed to rebuilding the relationship and correct the wrongs, maybe you should be the one making the advances instead of waiting for your AMCU and whoever else to ask you.
Yeah, agreed, Vuya, and we have made advances. In fact, I'm not going to speak on behalf of AMCU because they are not here, but we are on record having reached out to them to request that we have a conversation on how we're going to commemorate the events. And obviously, they gave us what the plan was, and we then cordially expected that then a formal invitation will be extended with a specific role that expected us to play. And clearly that hasn't come. I think it will be very uncultured of us to exploit the pain of the families and try and make such an event our show. I mean, this event is a very emotional event. In fact, on that note, I'd like to pass our heartfelt condolences to the family, the colleagues that were there on that day, and those that continue to work in those places that created such pain for the country and probably for the whole world.
Mm-hmm. I mean, a little later on, I'm speaking to officials from both AMCU and the NUM, who, as you know, I mean, in the recent past have sort of began to find one another, act together in the interests of their workers. And among the things that seem to have brought them together even more are some of utterances that get attributed to your CEO, for example, or the big 360 million rands package that it got. To what extent do you think those kinds of things aren't really conducive? In other words, spoil relations even more, because I mean, certainly from Joseph Matunjwa's address today, that was one of the rallying points, because it strikes a chord. And I think, if I remember correctly, he said something to the effect that if Mr. Froneman can get 360 odd million rands, then surely the workers can get the 20,000 that they will be asking for. Take a listen to what he had to say around the wage issue that they want to take up with your company going forward.
Sithi kusibanye, this year our demand, the basic salary is 20,000 rand. Asidlali. We have long past 12,500. City, we have long past 12,500. Neil Froneman cannot come and claim his victory. The money that we are earning today was through the blood of our brothers, was through the 5-month strike. Yena simlindile. If he can pay himself 360 million per year, surely can pay you a basic salary of 20,000 rand per month.
I think as your critics have argued, such obscene salary packages on the back of the history we are talking about now, because remember, those people died demanding, that 12 and a half, and look what happened. That such things, are perhaps the things that keep on sort of taking you further apart.
Yeah. Vuyo, I think there's two things that I would like to say in response to that clip. Number one is the issue of executive compensation is a well-governed conversation. I mean, we have the board, we have the remunerations committee, we have shareholders that vote at AGMs for our remuneration philosophy. And secondly, it is a factor of retaining similar kinds of skills. If you compare Sibanye and the value that we have created over the years for shareholders, noting that we are a company that was started in 2013, and when we started, our share price was about 10 rands odd, and at the time that these rewards were given, we had actually, I don't know, tenfold created value for more than tenfold for stakeholders, for shareholders. And if shareholders can then nod and approve to this, I think it is pretty clear that they also worry about retaining similar types of skills to be competitive globally. And I would like to request AMCU, because I know they've got very good research capacity, to actually look at the size of this company and how CEOs and executives are compensated across the world. And it's very interesting then to note that also CEOs packages and all that are a matter of public record. And I'll come back to that conversation. But the conversation I want us to have is the conversation of shared value, because everybody needs to understand that mining, and they know that it's a resource, and the commodity prices are pretty cyclical. And what you probably would have seen at the time that the long-term incentive plan lapsed and paid out, it was at the peak of the cycle where shareholder value was created. I think from a sustainability point of view and governance, it is critical to align the interests of shareholders with the interests of executives and management and staff. We are
I like the very last part, because my next question or comment was going to be, surely that can't all be attributed, to the CEO. The people shall share, to use an old
certainly, and I would say viva to that. But the issue here is shared value, and we need to look at shared value principles for the company our size or the companies in the mining industry. So CEO compensation, if you go back, you can go back to the previous annual reports. You cannot pick one annual report and want to create a noise around it, a noise that's unsubstantiated, in the sense that in 2018, if you look at how executives at Sibanye were compensated, we actually had long-term incentive measures that were never met, and you must actually then take our annual report of 2018 and 2019 and look at executive compensation, and then overlay that with what then came in 2021, as well as where the share price was. And the answer lies therein in terms of shared value. Again, I'm going to come back to the unions. In Marikana specifically, we have got an employee share ownership program, where employees, again, with aligning interest, got an average of about 36,000 from the ESOPs. That's like hard cash outside of their salaries, which again is that concept of shared value. If you think about shared value and the value flows that comes out of our company being in Marikana, I'm going to give you a number. We pay our employees about 600 million on living out allowances. And these living out allowances, from a shared value point of view, again, is the money that our employees use to rent rooms in Marikana, which creates economic flows for that community. If you look at our SLP spent between 2016 and 2021, we have spent about 2.2 billion rands on various SLP projects, ranging from roads, education infrastructure, health, local economic development, as well as social welfare. Again, that is shared value. So when we look at this thing, we need to look at it across the board in terms of, are we really creating value for all shareholders? And you have heard me quoting this number. We are pretty mindful that one miner feeds about 10 people. And if you look at the number of employees that we employ about 84,000. So you take that 2 times by 10. That's shared value in terms of the intrinsic value flows that are flowing to our stakeholders by the fact that we have facilities in Marikana that are employing people. And then you take the local industries in Marikana, those that get contract work, either to sink a shaft, to do repairs, to do maintenance. Again, that value is probably a multiplier of about 3 times. So when we look at these things, we need to look at shared value. We can have a conversation about how equitable is that value. And I guess that's the conversation that belongs in how do we create a socio-economic compact such that when the mining cyclical industry goes down, we are able to feel it. But when it goes up, we all share the spoils. That is an option that is always available as we engage on wage negotiations with the unions. I'm going to talk about also...
In fact, perhaps before you do that, so in summary, you're saying, because you went straight where I was going to take you next, you think that you've really done well to look after your employees, to look after your families, and to deliver on the promises that were made, subsequent, of course, to that unfortunate incident. And I'm going to say to you, on a scale of what, 1 to 10, how do you think you've fared?
Yeah, let me close this peace chapter of wages first. I just want to give you a number. Since 2013, our wages increases to employees in Marikana has gone up by 90%. In the country, if you take that period and you work out the cumulative inflation number, that inflation number is sitting at about 46%. So we've actually doubled the inflation in terms of really paying the salaries. But we can come back to that, because it's going to talk about what is fair and equitable. Coming to the families.
Okay. I'm glad you make it. Okay, let me make this comment. Let me do this. We're going to take a quick ad break, right? And on the line, we do have Mr. Vilakazi from the NUM and Mr. Matunjwa from AMCU. I'm going to ask them to comment directly on some of the things you have raised and whether they think, or maybe I should say, what their view is of how well you say the company has done in addressing some of the issues that brought the unfortunate incident that happened back 10 years ago. So if you could please, Mr. Ngosi, just bear with me. I won't keep you for long, just for a few minutes of our next conversation. And that conversation is going to take place right after this short ad break. Don't go away.
By those who are called themselves philosophers, for taking a stand for the living wage, to fight for the living wage for the downtrodden.
Now, on that fateful day, 10 years ago, when police opened fire at the miners, killing 34 of them, the National Union of Mine Workers, the NUM, and the Association of Mine Workers and Construction Union, AMCU, were bitter rivals, sworn enemies, in fact. Earlier this year, with only months to go before today's commemorative events, the two achieved a historic milestone. United in action, they stuck together and won significant concessions during their wage negotiations. The question we're asking tonight, as we commemorate that ugly incident that happened 10 years ago, is whether these two unions' leaders have realized that they are better together and that no boss or ideology should stop them from fighting for the workers they lead. Well, we're going to get some sober reflections from AMCU President Joseph Matunjwa and the NUM's Deputy President Philip Vilakazi. Let me thank both of you, gentlemen, for agreeing to come through. And perhaps before we get to this particular conversation, I would like to hear your views, listening earlier to what Mr. Ngosi from Sibanya Stillwater had to say, that they have gone a very long way in really dealing with the issues, that have been plaguing the mine for so long, many of which you've raised, and for which the workers who died were fighting. Just your thoughts from the little that you've been able to hear him say. Mr. Matunjwa?
Hi, good evening to you and good evening to your viewers. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you. And good evening to the panelists. Yes, one has to start by saying the genesis of the social discourse of this country emanate from the mineral energy complex from day immemorial. They've never been the good society partners in developing the societies. I was there in Marikana today, I mean, the word disappointment, it cannot express anything that I've seen there. The Marikana is worse than it was before 2012. There is no development whatsoever. The community, they still live in squalor. Still, there is no road, sewage, poverty is clear. These people are the community surrounding the mine that I believe is it's a number one in the world in producing platinum. And if you see Marikana as it is, as if these people, they are not neighbors, they are not hosting community of this company. So whatever that you see around with those flats, whether it's bachelor flats, whatever, it's what was built during Ben Magara's time. There is no development in that community, nothing at all. And when it comes to salaries, after the massacre, which now we call it Sibanye Stillwater massacre, we had to take a 5-month strike in order to better the salaries of the workers. You can even go to gold. We are just fresh from a 3-month strike where just workers were asking 1,000. And then the company was able to pay itself and their executive and their board members millions of rand, almost $1 billion of rand. So hence, as AMCO, we are saying, these salaries of the CEO must be kept. These bonuses that are just greed, are substantiated by greed, it has to come to an end. Because minerals are to serve the nation, are not to serve a foreign directives at the end of the day. These minerals are for the South Africans. The people shall share the wealth of the country. There is nowhere in the Freedom Charter where it says the CEOs will share the wealth of this country. So I think it's the administration, it's the government that is failing us in this regard. Okay, Mr. Vilakazi?
Well, thank you very much. With the panelist, Comrade Mathunjwa, I see Dlamini ukhona for the first time. Well, allow me to take it further and say we have a lot to narrate to South Africans. Especially, I will play within the ambit of law because I'm a bush lawyer by responsibility. Immediately, you have regulations which do not have punitive measures. It's a recipe for disaster. And it is common cause that South African government, since 1994, comrades relaxed and started to turn themselves into enemies instead of continuing to fight the system that has been put by apartheid. I can tell you, the books that I read told me that the Chamber of Mines has been built by the hands of our forebears who were paid by gumboots and helmets. It never stopped, it continued. This 5-month strike Joseph is referring to is a subsequent of a 21-day strike that just to strike for dignity. See us as people, because we are tools for you. You asked the question that does it mean NUM and AMCO, they are smoking the same pipe today? That question, hold it. You are still planning to clarify the marching orders to face the enemy who is capital. Yes. Indeed, you must appreciate that when I find Mathunjwa in a restaurant, he doesn't run away. He says, come, I'm one on the table. Then we tell the waiter that table for 2. That one I must confirm. Going forward with this issue of poverty in and surrounding mining communities, it is because there is no black person who owns a mine in South Africa. All our people are directors, 40%, 20%, 10%. People who owns the wealth of Africa as a continent are in the West. That is why all African leaders, if they are called to go to any country, be it Europe or Australia, they go there like a soccer team match. You can even see that their dignity as leaders is reduced, but their country is in trouble. Indeed, it is upon our unity as the working class. We have destroyed apartheid, and we will awake democracy, and we will make sure that those who are stealing from the poor are taken to book. Reality is that this poverty does not need us to see each other as enemies like it was before. You're right. You're right. We had a black-on-black violence kind of like, and we're not aware that this thing of using a color of a T-shirt to reduce a person into an enemy is a mistake, and that happened to give capital a laurel to be in a comfort zone. This has come to an end. We go to wages, we unite, because the enemy remains the employer.
Okay. Mr. Ngose, if I heard the two leaders correctly, in spite of your claims, you aren't really the good citizens that you said to me earlier you were. From where they are sitting, it's been a continuation of what was there before. And if I heard Mr. Matunjwa correctly, actually, things have gotten worse instead of getting better.
Yeah, Mr. Mvogo, I think, and yeah, good evening to Mr. Matunjwa and Umpepeto. I think the issue here that we need to talk about is inequality, because inequality is a wealth phenomena. So you cannot want to hold the mine accountable for the pure squalid conditions that you see as you drive outside of the mine to Nkaneng, and I'll tell you why. We spent 2.1 billion rands on social and labor plans. And in terms of the mining charter, social and labor plans are supposed to be driving social transformation. But the assumption of the social and labor plans where municipalities are going to be functional, fulfilling what they're supposed to be doing. I mean, you'll recall that in 2020, the mining industry, when we were down with COVID, paid something like north of 50 billion rands in taxes to the fiscus, which enabled the fiscus to do all sorts of other things. We continue to create value flows. As I'm talking to you, I mean, our tax bill is north of 5 billion rands. Our wage bill is 60% of our total sunken cost. We pay 20% of our costs to Eskom. So the whole concept of shared value should be perceived and looked at in that view. And yes, we do acknowledge that our employees are not having the best of lives, but that's the Gini coefficients of the country or as well as of the globe. What is very important is equitability. And when we talk about equitability, this is where I was actually saying, as far as we are concerned, we've seen improvements in terms of the lives of our employees. Now, you cannot use Nkaneng as an informal settlement to measure the life and the impact we're having as Sibanye on our own employees, because we know that our employees have got choices. Some choose not to build a fancy house around Nkaneng, which is closer to work, but they'll build a home where they're going to retire, and most of them do that. I mean, we've got facilities to enable and facilitate employee home ownership programs, which is actually subsidized by the company via our own houses of the company, as well as ensuring that we assist employees to access their kind of home improvement programs via their guarantees of the Provident Fund. We facilitate payroll deductions where necessary. So all these things, I mean, it's a pot that has got various moving pieces in it, but you cannot take that and attribute it to an employer, because the problem that you see in Marikana today is the problem that we see in Alexander. If you leave Sentin, you go to Alexander, you've got the squality. You know, it's a problem that we see in Cape Town. If you go to Cape Town, you go to the suburbs of Cape Town, you've got Imizamo Yetu right there. And that's the social fabric of South Africa. In fact, we are where we are today because of that. So if we need to solve this, we need all stakeholders to come into the room, which is what we're trying to do, get government into the room, get the labor movement into the room, get employers in the room, and talk about how do we create a socio-economic compact moving forward as the country to ensure that all stakeholders accrue value out of the existence of the economy of this country.
Is that not perhaps part or a big part of the problem, Mr. Matunza? I remember earlier, right at the beginning, you said that we're being failed also by the government. And this morning, the presidency issued a statement where they were talking about a whole lot of things. They say, you know, are happening from what the local government authority in Marikana is doing, from what the police, what is happening within the police, what the National Housing Department is doing, and all these things that need to be brought together. Is what Mr. Nkosi is saying then not true on the basis, on the back of what you said right at the beginning, and on the back of what I've just said the presidency statement was talking about? In other words, perhaps you are holding Sibanye Stillwater responsible for things that have very little, if anything, to do with it, with them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna depart from what I've just said. If the government was in control of the country and the resources, wouldn't be where we are today. Let's make an example. Why the mineral energy complex does not want to incorporate mining charter into MPRDA? Why? Is the reason that mineral energy complex are the one who runs the country from day immemorial. So we can say we have a government, but the people who've got a last say in the running of this government, it's mineral energy complex, and that we cannot run away from it. From day immemorial, it was like that and is still like that. So that's why I kept on saying the CEO of Sibanye is a prime minister of South Africa. They scared of this man. I don't know what, he has done to this government. He say it's lie. I mean, once he says something, he'll do exactly. So there is no consequences. I mean, the mining charter is a code of good practice. So there is nothing, you can go to Limpopo, you can go to Anglo or other, but particular Sibanye, it hates its employees like you cannot believe. Let's make a good example as they are painting this nice picture. When they acquired Lonmin, which we as workers, we wanted to buy Lonmin, the first letter, the first introductory letter was retrenchment. Guess who was the first in the list? The same widows that they purport and claim that they're doing renewal, they are looking after them. They were the first in the list to be retrenched. And if it was not AMCO who stood up and say, proceed with your retrenchment, we're going to close your shafts, those widows would be back home. So, where is carrying? Where is the shared value? Huh? They came in and undermined the commemoration which we've been holding for the past 9 years. And they went and set up a wall of remembrance without the consent of the family and the widows, and engraved them right in the barracks somewhere in the security area without the consent of the widows, to show the arrogance of Sibanye. And as Comrade Vilakazi is saying, we're gonna teach these minds a good lesson. They are not gonna piss in our head. We will fight whenever we see discrimination and poverty and exploitation. We will fight without any reservation. Sibanye is very cruel. Look at the gold sector. How much are those workers are earning in those mines? They are, even Zamazama, they are earning better than the employees of Sibanye. I'm not saying I'm advocating for wrongdoing, for lawlessness, but the Zamazamas are earning better than the employees of Sibanye. They are poor. They are paying themselves huge bonuses. We have to fight just to get 800 rand for 3 months. They give themselves bonuses, whereas the very same share value that is talking about their employees in the gold sector, they don't receive it. If they're giving them bonuses, they are giving them about 50 rand, 35 rand, whereas themselves, they are taking millions and millions. And the 36,000 or whatever, 600 million that they are saying they paid in Lon Min, that was an agreement that we negotiated with Ben Magara during Lon Min's time. The same agreement we wanted to be implemented in gold sector, and the workers at the gold sector, they said they want the same agreement. They didn't want to implement it. So they mustn't come here and paint a good picture as if they're the caring employee. They will never care. They are from the old school of mineral energy complex.
Do you want to respond directly to that, Mr. Nkosi? Was I wanted to ask Mr. Vilakazi something else?
Yeah, I would like to respond to that, and I would like to remind the viewers at home that Sibanye was formed in 2013. And when Sibanye was formed, it was formed out of the gold assets that were a spin-off from Goldfields. In fact, when we took those assets, they were given a life of mine of between 5 to 8 years. And I'm sitting here today, I can tell you that we've extended the life of mine of those assets to 10 to 15 years. And hence, we need to start talking about shared value, because if we look at the gold assets and you look at an asset that has got a life of mine that is left of 2 years, for example, if you take Beatrix in the Free State, if the unions, and this is a very good example of shared value and a compact. If the unions, when we announced the Section 189 4 years ago, never saw reason to actually say we will save jobs, but we understand that these assets are actually closer to the end. We will come up with a program that looks at cost savings and ensuring that every 3 months we review the profitability of the assets. Some of those shafts would have closed in the Free State, and I'm talking to you today, they're still there. So there are good examples of where that compact has come into place. And I think if you look at Marikana shafts have got about 40 to 50 years life of mine. So it will be very irresponsible of the company to want to give increases that fast track the life of mine by another 5 years because we're trying to get a deal at all costs. I think our spirit of negotiation is about doing the right thing for all stakeholders. And all stakeholders means everybody. It means the government, it means our employees, it means communities that are hosting us that continue to benefit out of our SLP programs. It means the unions, because they also get member subscriptions of 200 Rand per member every month that those employees continue to be employed. And that's the value flows that I'm talking about. So we will not try at any given point to say we now got this deal at PGM, we're now going to plug that deal at Cook, because as we speak today, Cook assets were closed 2 years ago. You know, and if we plugged that deal, probably would have fast-tracked that closure by another year or year and a half. So it has to be cognizant that, I mean, in terms of our total cost bucket, in the gold segment, I think employee costs are a fixed cost of about 60%. You add electricity by a very intensive energy user, that's another 23%. So before you start having any conversations, you've got about close to about 70%, 80% of your costs being sunken. And that's the understanding that we seek as we engage, because we engage with true transparency, we give the numbers, and it is unfortunate that in law, the unions are allowed the right to strike, and they'll exercise that right, and we hope that they'll exercise it responsibly. And we're not going to sit here and argue about the gold strike, because the gold strike was the gold strike. We're sitting here talking about Marikana and what we're doing in Marikana to correct the wrongs of the past.
Mr. Vilakazi, I mean, when you, Mr. Matunza was talking about being failed by the government by and large, and what individuals in the form of Sibanye Stillwater's CEO, Mr. Froneman, then get to, exploit what is essentially either irresponsible or not caring a government. You spoke earlier about marching orders. You said you've been given by your members, which are going to bring you together even more. As AMCU and the NUM. Who are those marching orders directed at? Is it the government? Is it the industry as a whole, or all of the above?
Well, that's a very good multiple choice, and the suitable answer is all of the above. The only issue that we need to do is the sequence of events. You hit the dog if you want to see the owner. And in this case, the only dog that twists its tail before us is the employers. Let me tell you something very much strange. And I know Dlamini and Ubaba Matunjwa, what they are saying. You see, it's very much painful when you see us being forced to see each other as enemies, depending from the proximity of the problems that we are facing as society. The inheritance of these operations from Anglo Gold to Sibanye, from Sibanye to... And if you check, it's only the change of face. The operation remains the same, and the victim remains the workers. Africa has provided South Africa with labor for a number of years, even before I was born. The books I'm reading told me that people who work in the mine have got 4 lives to live. The first life is the life of the village where they come from. The second life is of the shaft where they work. The third life is something else beneath or in the belly of the earth. And the fourth life is the slavery life that they get exposed as a result of what they are trying as a try for living.
Do you know,
struggle for a living, this thing of a living wage, Mvo, is not something that you are going to cap it. If we are not going to be careful of the fact that today, as we sit here, fuel price and food price have gone way above. What does it mean to the workers? Instead of somebody who sits and control the wealth and say, no. It is common cause that when petrol increases, food will increase. What about the workers? Remember, if you go to ShopRite, there is no price that is meant for President Matunjwa or for Vilakazi or for Nkosi. A loaf of bread is of the same price, irrespective of a position. So is Neil Froneman and his team. Why must they get a big chunk of the wealth while those who are in the cold face, they can't even buy themselves a bicycle?
You know
this is the strategy we are talking about.
You know what is even stranger, and I can't resist this on the back of what you've said just now, is that all of this is happening under the watch of a president and a minister of energy who were both general secretaries of a mine workers union. You would have thought that even the books they read, the books that you've read, that they would have read them too, or at least similar books. In other words, they would be so equipped to understand, let alone even before they actually do something about the problems that all of you are highlighting.
Yeah. You see, if I may, sorry, Dlamini, sorry, Mzana, you see, there is one thing that you must understand here. And I will be biblical, Comrade Matunjwa, understand. Sometimes when the spirit goes high, the only solution is in the Bible.
He sends those brothers and sisters messages every morning.
If you go as somebody who has got ethics, you will understand your origin. There is no way in which you can be conditional like a chameleon. The sustainability of your political conscience is something that you must die advocating, irrespective of the position and the material condition that you're facing. If you are to represent the poor, understanding that you are poor, no matter how better you think you are at that particular time, you must understand that your belonging, you are from the class of the poor. Remember, the repentance of Apostle Paul from Saul, all what he was doing is to interrogate and run behind Christians, trying to destroy Christianity. But Apostle Paul changed and he became the advocate of Christianity. The understanding of the comrades, I'm not going to hold them accountable because there is no clause in the Constitution of the Union that says if a person is deployed in government, he changes doings, he changes whatever he does, we must call him and remind him who he is. Difficult situation to deal with.
Okay.
We are still working class campus. for us is to deal with them. The last point, the minerals of this country belongs to the state on behalf of the society. But if you go and check all the provinces where there are mines, worst case is this issue of rehabilitation. I mean, it happens in Bosbeck, it happens in Free State, now it happens in Krugersdorp. And we have been writing letters to DMRE to say to DMRE, where is the rehabilitation funds of these companies, because they are running from one company to another, and the wealth, the country, the land is not repossessed or repurposed to be used again. That is why today we have got criminals.
Okay, we have run out of time, and I don't think, Mr. Mathunjwa, you want to add anything to what Mr. Vilakazi has said beyond hallelujah, amen.
Yeah, but I want to add a quick...
Okay. I'll give you some goals in a second, yeah. Just a few last words from you, Mr. Mathunjwa.
No, the fact of the matter is the mineral energy complex, I think they have to change heart and understand that these minerals, everyone has to share to it. So as long as the mineral energy complex have no change, radical change of their values, people will continue until maybe we've got a new administration that will make sure that the wealth of the country is radically distributed to all people of South Africa. I think this issue of these mines taking the whole wealth of this country and leave us poor, it has to change. This inequality in this country is gonna cause a hell of a havoc amongst the rich and the poor. And if those who are holding these mines, who are benefiting these billions and millions, not sharing with the community, one day this shaft will be closed down by the same community.
Mr. Ngosi, is the industry alive to that reality?
The industry is alive to that because that's where the socio-economic compact comes in, because we cannot continue to have a winner-takes-all approach, but it requires all stakeholders to come to the room for the common good and have a conversation. I'd like to leave a page of economics as well. In a country where unemployment is so high and an underground worker at Sibanye earns 14,500 as an entry salary, if you add a bonus, that salary goes to about 15,500. You asked me on a scale of 10, how do we think we're doing for our workers? I think we're doing at 8 to 10. For the widows and the families, we've fulfilled all our promises except one, which is seeking justice. You'll recall that the Solicitor General was on national media talking about the government having compensated, and he challenged Babu Mathunjwa to meet with him so that they can fast-track the payment or settlement of the other 43 families. We are actually worried about justice for the 10 widows that were not on that claim for the state, and they haven't received any justice, no prosecution, no payment. And Sibanye is committed to put up a fund to actually have those families get justice.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there for now. Thank you very much to all of you for your time. We have seriously run out of time. We even had to cancel something we were also going to do as part of this conversation as the country was commemorating the 10th anniversary of that massacre. As you heard from the worker leaders, we are far from where we're supposed to be going. But of course, I mean, you heard Mr. Ngosi saying they're doing their damn best to actually take us there, or to do what is required of them. But that's all we had time for. Thank you for watching. But do join us again tomorrow evening, same time. Have a good night.